this is the Provoked Prawn, and this is a video to compare two interesting, feature-rich and comfortable gaming mice, the ROG Gladius III Wireless and the ROG Chakram Core. Now these are two interesting mice for a number of different reasons, and I'm going to compare them and talk to you about the different features and facets and specs on these mice to give you an idea of which is better for your personal preference. Now I have reviewed and unboxed both these mice separately. Be sure to check out the links in the description to see those videos because I go into a lot of depth on all the various things, including the software. But what I want to talk to you about is the difference in the design and the layout of them. So we'll start with the Chakram Core. Now the Chakram Core is an interesting wired mouse. There are two variants, and the standard Chakram is a wireless version. The setup here is really interesting for a number of reasons, not least of which is it has 9 programmable buttons. It also has a joystick on the side, as is shown there, and it has swappable switches, which makes it interesting too. It's a right-handed mouse, and it's also a sort of weighty one because it comes with its own weight system, so you can adjust the weight of it. As standard, it's 97 grams. You can add in that additional weight, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute, which makes it 111 grams. You also have 2 different joystick types, or you can blank that out entirely. The thing that makes this interesting for me is that it works with Nvidia's Reflex Latency Analyser, and I covered more of this in the review and also in a separate video. Essentially allows you to track how the mouse is performing and the latency from your system into the game, and then get a better response. If you have a fast refresh rate monitor and a good mouse like this, then you can match those things up to get a really good performance out of your gaming setup, which is pretty interesting. As you can see, some interesting highlights to this mouse already. As a nice thumb rest, it has obviously the removable weight system. It is quite heavy, so if you're looking for a lightweight mouse, then the Gladius 3 is probably more appealing, although that isn't particularly lightweight either. That comes in at 89 grams, so it's a roughly 10 grams lighter without the weight system. Both mice have swappable switches though, which makes them interesting. So you can see that the Chakram Core comes apart relatively easily. Most of the things are just held in place with magnets, and then you get access to be able to see the underneath and what's going on in there. In the box you also get a little switch puller, so you can pull out those switches that are in there. They're Omron switches, and they are 3-pin, but you can replace them with other ones. Now this is pretty nifty if you're concerned that over time the switches are going to wear out, or if you want to be able to just simply replace them with better ones or a different setup. You have the option to do that. It's just a push fit design, so it's really easy to do. You just pull them out and push them back in again, or push some new ones in. As long as they'll work, you'll have a wonderful setup there. Now the Gladius III Wireless is similar in some ways and quite different in others. You'll notice, for example, it doesn't have a thumb rest, it doesn't have a joystick, and it doesn't have as many programmable buttons. There are just 6 instead of 9, but it too has removable switches. This is also a wireless mouse, so it has a lot more connectivity options than the Chakram Core. It has a USB-C cable, a wireless dongle, and also Bluetooth connectivity as well. In the box, you also get some replacement PTFE feet. These are Teflon feet. You'll note that the Gladius 3 has some quite large PTFE areas. It probably shines a bit more than the Chakram Core, which doesn't have quite as much, but they're both very slick. One thing I will say about both these mice is they're both quite large and fit nicely in larger hands. I found them to be quite comfortable. Gladius 3 is interesting because it has a bit more height to it, and so it sits off the desk nicely and pushes up into your palm, which makes it quite comfortable if you have a palm grip, but it will also work with other grip styles too. I found it really nice to use. You'll also see that there are side buttons on the side and a DPI button on top, and it has some really nice design aesthetics in terms of things like RGB lighting. It has a really sort of opaque RGB glow to it that you'll see, and also some interesting etching on the left hand side with some ROG writing on it. Now the switches on this mouse are also removable. It's not quite as simple as with the Chakram Core though. You need to take some bungs off the underside and then unscrew a couple of screws. Fairly straightforward. You will also note on the underside there is a little tiny port at the bottom which holds the USB dongle. You'll also see a button to switch between Bluetooth wired and wireless modes, so you can do that quite easily, and a profile switching button too. So you have buttons on the underside and a nice setup in terms of the layout of the PTFE areas and how that works. But that's a magnetic dock for holding your little 2.4 gigahertz wireless dongle when you're not using it. So it's a nice sort of storage area, so you won't lose it. And that makes the setup pretty easy. Once you take that top off, you'll also notice that you can see not only the switches, but also the battery. I believe that you'll be able to swap that battery out in the long term if you need to. If you find that the battery is no longer working, it looks like you've got fairly easy access to be able to change that out. There's no instructions on how to do it, but I'm pretty sure that you could. But the main reason to be able to take that off is to be able to access those switches and change them out. The Gladius 3 wireless comes with two different sorts of switches. It has Omron optical switches, and it also has his ROG's own setup and the switches there. So you get a choice between the two, but also you can swap between others with either 3-pin or 5-pin setups. So what you can see is quite similar in the way they're set up in terms of customization of the switch options and being able to access what's going on underneath. So a pretty nifty mice in that way. The Chakram Core is certainly a better choice if you're looking for something which promises to be a pro-level gaming mouse. It obviously has a really low latency response, and as I said, it's designed to work with Nvidia's Reflex Latency Analyser, so it will give you a better performance when gaming. I also really liked it for a number of reasons, not least of which is the multitude of buttons. Having 9 programmable buttons is fantastic. That joystick is also interesting, although if you don't like it, you can just use a blanking plate to get rid of it. But there are adjustable sizes on it, and it's digital and analog, so you can set it up to actually use it for movement or for other commands in game. Both mice are also designed with a 0 gap, so a distance between the mouse button and the switch is minimal, which means that you basically have instant actuation when you press the buttons. They lead to a very satisfying click and a really good action on them. You'll see quite a striking difference in the design of it though. The Chakram Core sits a bit lower on the desk, and although I found it to be a large mouse, it's certainly a bit more sort of stealthy in its layout and the overall sort of aesthetic of it. I actually really like this mouse as well for that thumb rest. I really enjoy the addition of the thumb rest. It is, however, quite a bit weightier than the Gladius 3, especially when you add in that additional weight. I liked that because it made it feel like I was getting more for my money, but it is an interesting point. Now, the Chakram Core has a push-fit design with the switches, and it comes with just one set of switches with 3 pins, but you can obviously buy other switches from Omron. If they have that 3-pin design, you'll then be able to install them in the future, so it's nice to have that option to be able to do that. It's really easy to get access inside the mouse as well, thanks to that magnetic setup with the outer shell, so it's a really straightforward process. These are Omron switches that are guaranteed up to 50 million clicks. I'm going to leave all these specifications of both mice in the description so you can find out more, but it is interesting. There are some minor differences in the specs. For example, the Gladius 3 has a max acceleration and speed of 400 FPS and 50 Gs, while the Chakram Core is 400 FPS and 40 Gs, so a slight difference there. They both have 1000 Hz polling rate, but obviously you have a lot more action in the Chakram Core in terms of buttons. Now here you can see a little look at the Gladius 3 wireless. You'll know what I was saying about the sort of design of the RGB lighting. It's not too garish or in your face. You have a very nice comfortable fit thanks to that sort of large shell, and I really like the sort of overall aesthetic of this mouse. It has some nice RGB lighting on the mouse wheel and also along the side and the logo, and essentially gives you a good glow there. There's some good action on the wheels, and you'll see a very nice sort of textured grip to it and a really subtle glow to it. Again, 0 gap design on the button switches, and I didn't find any unnecessary play or anything in it like that. It was a very enjoyable mouse to use, and being a lighter weight mouse, it's also easier to move around. It's certainly not the lightest mouse that I've tried. There are a lot of other lightweight options out there. It has a USB-C connection with a very floppy and agile mouse cable as well, which makes it simple to use. You'll see just the sort of texture of that. It doesn't snag or get in the way when you're gaming, which is obviously a welcome thing. This uses Bluetooth or 2.4 gigahertz wireless. You get more battery out of the Bluetooth than you do the wireless connection. And I found, to be honest, that the battery wasn't amazing, although it does have some pretty good intelligence in terms of how it manages the battery. And obviously, if you turn the RGB lighting off, that makes a big difference. In the box, you also get an extension adapter, so you can just plug it in and have easy access to that. Chakram Core is, as I said, a wired mouse, so you can't do any of those things. But there is another version of this which is wireless. But if you want the Reflex Latency Analyser capable one, and if you want a more pro level mouse which offers all those sort of high-end specs, then the Chakram Core is the better option of the two. So what you're seeing is two quite different mice with a similar comfort level and really good sort of design in terms of that push fit switch option. So it's really nice to have that customization option. Here you can see me demonstrating how you get the joystick off. So you can choose between two different setups. You can have a short one, or you can have one that sticks out a bit further, so longer joystick. As I said, this is digital and optical. You can actually program it, for example, within Steam settings to be able to use it as a controller. And so there were points where I was playing with just the mouse and no keyboard, moving around with a joystick and then shooting with the mouse buttons. So it is possible to do that if you want to do it, but it's nice to have sort of that extra action, because you obviously have loads of potential action here that you can program within ROG Armory Crate. But if you don't like that joystick, you find it gets in the way, you can just use this blanking plate to cover it over, and then you don't have to worry about that anymore. But you have 9 programmable buttons that you can customize. One of the things I didn't like about this mouse, though, is the DPI switching button is on the underside. I prefer it personally be on top. This is a personal preference. I know some people don't really care about that, but I like to be able to switch my DPI when I want to quite easily, and with this you can't do that. However, the overall setup is really good and it's very comfortable to use. I have noted that some people said that they found that the joystick was too far forward and they couldn't easily access it. I didn't have that problem when I used it. I found it was perfectly accessible, but this is obviously going to vary depending on the shape and size of your hand. The Chakram Core actually speaks to a very good quality. When you take that cover off, you can see the sort of overall and internal design of it, and it certainly looks like a very good quality design that's going to last. You'll see a lot of little magnets and the movement in the switches. Again, zero gap design, so it's designed to be really sleek, and you'll also note some of the sort of ergonomic shape to those buttons. Very comfortable in the way it fits in the hand, and a really nice action to it. Now, in terms of RGB lighting, I think that the Gladius 3 wireless is the better of the two. I noted in my review that the Chakram Core is quite stealthy and understated in its overall sort of aesthetic. You have seen some of the glow from the mouse wheel and things in the clips earlier on in this video, but overall this is a much more sort of understated setup. However, I don't think it should be dismissed. I actually personally would probably prefer the Chakram Core from day to day, simply because the number of buttons, the thumb rest, and the overall setup of it. However, there is a lot to be said for having that wireless freedom. The other thing that makes the Gladius 3 wireless interesting is that it has the option to change out the switches, but also you have more choice because it has both 3-pin and 5-pin connections. So you can choose between a wider range of switches, and it's really easy to do. Again, you get a little puller in the box. You just pull the switch out and replace it. So as standard, it comes with the red ROG ones, but you also get these black optical switches from Omron, so you can switch those out, and there's a different pin setup between them. They're a little bit fiddly to push, but they are hot swappable, so you can do it. And here you can see a little close-up look at the difference between those. Now, ASUS says that these are tested in the factory to ensure there's a very little deviation between them, so the two switches should give you the same action, and you have a very good, comfortable and accurate response from them as well. And you'll note the pin differences here, very slight, but it's pretty neat that they've sort of included a design which can cater to both sorts of layouts, because obviously that requires quite a different design internally. So there's a lot more going on the underside of this mouse than is apparent when you first get it out of the box. But when you take it apart and you get a closer look at the thing, there's a lot more interest. You cannot remove the side buttons though, so the side buttons can't be swapped out, only the front two. But you'll see from this top-down view and the close-up looks that you can probably quite easily remove that battery in the future should you need to. When I turn the RGB lighting on without the shell on, you'll also note how that works in terms of the glow from the mouse wheel. It's very understated and very nice. I really like the RGB lighting here. Very subtle, not too in your face, and gives a nice gentle glow to the fingers too when you're using it. I found the Gladius 3 wireless to be a very comfortable mouse to use. They're both wonderful in terms of that overall setup and the way they work. They're really user friendly with that push fit design. It's dead simple to be able to take out the switches and swap them out for another one, and it's really nice to have the option to do that if you're worried about the longevity of the mouse, or if you just want to try some different switch setups on your mouse, then you have the option to be able to do that really easily. It's a very nice design choice. So overall, two fantastic mice. Which is best for you is really going to be down to a personal preference. I really like the sort of height of the Gladius 3. I feel like it pushes up into my palm really nicely. Also has a really nice overall aesthetic. USB-C charging, zero gap design, and a really nice setup. But the Chakram Core is my personal preference because it has more buttons and it has that thumb rest. The joystick's pretty nifty, and obviously it has the benefit of the push fit switches as well. So they're both wonderful in that way. This has been the Provoked Prawn. I hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Hope you found this video useful, interesting, hilarious, or otherwise. Take a look at these other videos that I think you might find interesting as well. And have a look at the description for links and other information you might find useful. Click that join button to see the benefits of being a member of my YouTube channel. And most importantly, have a great life.